Well, hey everybody. Today I have the opportunity to share about our small group system. A traditionally vexing system to get going, as most of you know, but we've pressed forward based upon some converging ideas and opportunities that we're going to spend the next few minutes telling you about. We're going to talk about what's worked, we're going to talk about what hasn't worked, and we're going to try to share some things that we're still working on. So, my name is Scott Sittig, and I'm joined today by our small group coordinators, Melanie King and Ann Kashner, and we all serve at New Hope in the city of Rochester. So, thanks for tuning in. So today I'm going to start by talking about our converging opportunities. For a long time we have desired to be a church that is built around small groups. You might say a church of small groups, not just a church with small groups. Of course, we've been inspired by several different ideas throughout our conference, and one of the ideas that has inspired me and several of the leaders, I know Melanie and Ann have bought into the system from Rick Rouse's church, One Church, and all those 8 systems that he's promoted and taught so many of us. I really believe in the small group system that he laid out for us. So between the desire that I've always had for us to be a church of small groups and that particular system, the third event that kind of brought this all together over the last year is what we've all been through, something called COVID. I think you know what I'm talking about. And so COVID gave us an opportunity to reimagine how we live into this small group system. Partly because it gave us the opportunity to approach COVID with the cautiousness that I think our church felt we needed to approach it with, but also with an intentionality to really live into it. So let me just explain that really quickly, and then I'm going to bring in Melanie and Ann here. So we chose to live into the pandemic challenges with a mindset of opportunity. So, of course, the church was kind of forced to move away from its tradition and some of the familiarity. Couldn't meet on Sunday mornings. Maybe God was kind of nudging us to rethink some things. We've been open to that. So we focused upon how could we embrace the opportunity? What could we do new with that? How could we connect with people in spite of not meeting on Sunday mornings? Initially, we launched wholeheartedly into the live streaming options. We certainly learned a lot there, but we definitely learned over time how much people got burnt out with being on Zooms and other forms of live streaming. So though we weren't quite comfortable moving back to full in-person services last fall, and knowing that small groups are still a high priority for us, we chose to press into developing our small group system on Sunday mornings in lieu of Sunday services. And the logic was that it remained a time when most everybody was still kind of focused on having some form of a church experience, and small groups were an option for us to meet safely and within guidelines. So we met for much of the fall and winter and early spring, including going fully virtual somewhere in the middle of the winter when the numbers started to spike. But by encouraging the smaller group settings, we were living into the state guidelines and the CDC recommendations, and we were able to press, really, I think, into our desire to build a stronger emphasis on small groups. At Easter, just this couple weeks ago, we held an in-person service, and that was awesome. We all loved it, right? But as leaders, we wanted to remain committed to small groups while we continue to emerge from the pandemic mindset. And what I mean by that is it's actually been hard for some people to grapple with getting back to being in person. And we knew that was going to take some time, and so we've developed a strategy to give people some space to gradually grow into that. So we've developed what we call a hybrid plan. And so what we have today is a hybrid model where we meet for in-person services on the first Sunday of the month, and then we have small groups the remaining weeks of that month. And we're going to continue this model through the summer and then reevaluate where we stand for the fall. So that's kind of where we are, just a little bit of background. We're going to give you more detail here as we move forward. I'm going to turn now to you guys, to Ann, and maybe have you start by telling us a little bit about the One Church model. a lot of people on here are going to be familiar with it. A lot of us have attended Rick's trainings, so that's going to be great. But I'd like you to tell how, maybe in a pre-COVID fashion, how did it work for us? What did we do with it? And what was our kind of success with that? And we can start there.
Yeah, so the way that we adopted the one church model, the way that we understand it, is that it's a trimester system for small groups, so that each small group session is 3 months of meeting and then 1 month break in between the sessions. And during that break, we would then do signups once again for the next session of small groups, recruit leaders, and develop content, and then we would start the next session again. So it would be three months small groups on and 1 month off. And for us, the strength of this model was being able to provide a on-ramp and off-ramp for our members to be involved in small groups. Given that we were trying to kind of kickstart or restart our small group ministry at this church, it was helpful to be able to tell people, you're only signing up for the small group for 12 weeks. It's only a 12-week commitment. In the end, many people did want to stay with the small group that they were in, but if that wasn't working for them, if that time didn't work for them, or the group just didn't quite coalesce, they were able to switch to a different group. And in the end, that worked very well for our congregation.
That's cool. Yeah, so in that sense, our groups weren't static, right? They were designed to potentially be constantly changing. Is that what we experienced? Say a little bit more about that, because I don't think that was what our experience ended up being, right? Our groups tended to be a little bit more, they stuck together, I think.
In the end, people did stick with the groups that they started with. They were happy to take a 1 month break, but then they signed up once again for the same group. But I do think overall that there was a little bit of a rotation, and I think that it discourages the kind of stagnation of groups that you get when small groups just go on indefinitely.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about how we tackled curriculum and thinking through curriculum and all of that sort of thing. What was our approach to that? This is kind of pre-COVID again. So.
Right. So pre-COVID, Melanie and I developed the curriculum together with Scott, and typically we were looking for content that matched what Pastor Scott was going to do with his sermon series over that time period. And sometimes it worked out just perfectly, and sometimes the timing was just a little off, but that was okay. We used curriculum. We have used curriculum that was already developed that we were able to use from Right Now Media. We also developed our own curriculum. We developed a study guide around Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book, Life Together. We did a couple of different Bible studies as well, and now we're working through the Free Methodist way, through Light and Life.
Yeah. So it's been pretty collaborative, but I mean, you guys have, when necessary, taken a deeper dive on developing questions and putting content together. Some of it's been pre-planned for us a little bit, so that's good. Melanie, tell us a little bit about where we stand today. Like, what are our numbers at, and kind of talk to us a little about some of the stats, what we're experiencing.
Yeah, so currently we have 6 groups, and they're averaging about 12 people per group. Now that is, and we'll get to this in a second, our current reality. Some groups are online, some groups are in person. Mm-hmm. So that really has quite a big variety of group size. But in total, we have 71 people as a part of some small group. And that is about just over half, about 55% of the adults that are either members, regular attenders, or visitors to New Hope.
Yeah. So we kind of count that as pretty significant, right? I mean, have over 50% of the people involved. Talk to us a little bit about their structure, because like you said, they're not all meeting in person. Some chose to stay. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that was really part of what drew us to sort of pivoting towards small groups on Sunday mornings. I might think of it as small groups are what church is right now, and in the last few months, that there's just such a variety of what people are comfortable with and what people are looking for right now, that with having many different groups, we have a couple groups that are online groups. They're not going to be in person, at least through the semester. That's what they're committed to. And there are many people, that's what they feel comfortable with. And that's given us the ability to accommodate people's different levels of comfort. And some people are comfortable meeting in person with certain restrictions, or the group can kind of evaluate how they feel, and rather than having to make a church-wide decision that everyone kind of has to fit into, we're able to be a little bit more flexible, able to follow the numbers. The small group that I'm in currently is a hybrid group, although we've been online for quite a while now. We've had the conversation several times about if we're ready to come back in person, and each time we've just kind of come up no, that given the different situations people are in, they're just not ready. So those online groups are tending to be a little bit on the bigger side compared to the in-person groups.
Yeah, our particular group, just to feed off of that, is what I would consider even more a pure hybrid group, because we actually meet in person. We have several that do come in person, and then I turn on the computer, and we still have a few people that log in online because on any given Sunday they can't make it, or they don't want to make it, or whatever. So we've had a true hybrid. How about your group, Ann? What is your group doing?
We met online in the first part of the pandemic, and then the last several months we meet in person. And we have been comfortable with that because we're a smaller group. Many of us have been vaccinated, and that way our kids are able to play together.
And that was important to you. Say more about that. That was an important, I'm going off script here a little bit, but tell us, your kids, how has this process affected them and the small group system?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, having our small group online, it actually served my husband and I very well. Just having small group over Zoom, we still felt really connected to our small group, but our kids were not involved. And our kids had really come to love New Hope on Sunday morning. And so coming back in person allowed them to experience church together again with some more kids, and maybe even more importantly, some other adults in their life.
Face to face, right? Instead of over a screen, because your kids are doing school over screens, and so it's allowed for them to get that face to face a little bit. So it's been nice to have a variety of ways to connect with different people, and I think from where I'm sitting pastorally, I think it's been a fantastic way to give many different avenues for people to connect to the life of the church. And I think that's what I've really liked about its flexibility. Obviously, it hasn't all gone perfectly, right? So, Melanie, you want to address maybe some things that haven't worked well, or some struggles that we've had?
Yeah. So, sure, it won't be a surprise that I feel like no matter what we do right now, there's gonna be struggles. So one of the struggles is with not meeting in person regularly. There are people who aren't connected with a small group. We said 55%, so there's another 45% of the church that are regularly engaging with New Hope, or at least had been, and in that piece of communication, and sort of maintaining a sense that we're one church that's all connected. One way we've tried to deal with that is that our small groups are going through the same content. In some previous semesters, we've had maybe different small groups do different things back before COVID, but now we've felt that is really a unifying force, that even though there are different small groups that we're still, as a church, kind of grappling with the same topics and thinking through the same things. As far as communication, we're communicating updates and messages through the small groups, as well as online. There are emails and Facebook and all that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
and I think that's always the case that, sometimes if people aren't engaged, I don't know that there's a way to really capture everyone and hold them and tell them the information. But besides that, I think there've been, to me, more advantages than disadvantages to having the small groups as what we're doing on Sunday mornings as far as engaging people. I think there would be probably more people we would lose if we had either stuck with always doing live stream, not in person, or gone to only in person.
Yeah.
Because I think on both sides of that, there are people who just would check out.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. So I know we all aspire, everybody watching this, we aspire to Rick Warren's definition of success, which is 101% of your church or more, right, being involved in small groups. We haven't hit that, but I do feel like we've been relatively successful at making this transition, using this model to help us get through this season. And it's not so much because of the numbers, but because of the flexibility like you're describing and the avenues that people have had to get on and off as they've been comfortable with it or something like that. I want to switch gears a little bit and just give a little bigger picture, kind of step back a little bit. Anne, tell us a little bit why you lead this ministry. Why is small groups, and Melanie, you can weigh in too if you want, but why is it important to you? Why should it be important to any church, maybe? But let's start with yourself.
I think for me, as long as I've been a part of churches, small group ministry has been like one of my favorite parts. And part of that is just being an extrovert, but also I just really believe that small group ministry is the most meaningful way to develop a really rich community for a church. Sunday morning is for worship, and it's a good time for small talk. Many people are involved in service groups like committees through their church, and that can be a good way to make friendships. But small groups are a really committed way for the community to come together, to encourage one another to grow in their faith, and also to, I think, just see the Holy Spirit working in the group and in each other.
Yeah, it's huge. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah,
Melanie?
I can add. It's interesting. You said as an extrovert. I feel as an introvert that small groups have been where I've been most engaged. Because honestly, for me, trying to engage with people on a Sunday morning, it's just a bit overwhelming. There's so many people, and you feel like, or at least I felt that, maybe there's a little bit of small talk, but that's a difficult place for me to kind of meaningfully engage. And I've always found that small groups are a little bit more manageable, a little bit more focused, and it's a little clearer what are we engaging about, and what sort of having something we're looking at together, and some ways that we're growing together. And that's really been how I have found more genuine connection in church in general.
Yeah. And I've had a similar experience to both of you. Small groups, life groups, any way we've talked about it over the years, it's been some of the most pivotal and informative times for my wife and I, for our kids. Some of our most enduring relationships have come out of that. It's just been, it's significant. And so, again, as we kind of press forward, I've told you guys, I've told our leadership team, I'm really committed to being a church of small groups. And if that means that we have to keep meeting on Sunday mornings because people are dedicated to already meeting, I'm actually kind of committed to doing that. So even though we might reevaluate all this in the fall, and we enjoyed being together over Easter, and I think our in-person services are going to gain some momentum, I don't want to lose the emphasis on small groups for these very reasons, because I think to grow as disciples, we need that space to dig deeper, to be in relationship with one another, to be pushing each other. And so that's kind of a core commitment that I'm making to myself and to the church, that it remains a priority for us. So with that said, final thoughts?
I think I would also just mention that I think one of the things we've learned since we transitioned to having small groups on Sunday mornings is that for many people, it's more comfortable to invite somebody to your small group than it is to invite them to church on Sunday morning. And we've seen a little bit of growth through that, and I think that's really significant, and I think we'll continue to see that.
Your group actually is experiencing that quite a bit. You've grown, you've more than doubled, I think, since you've been meeting in person, right? So, and it's been great to be able to kind of encourage people to attend different groups based upon the nature of that group, right? Some people want to be online. Okay, here's 2 or 3 options. You want to be in person? Here's an option. You want to be a person and you have kids? Here's an option. Anyway, we've got quite a variety of options that way. So, Melanie, any final thoughts? You've been leading small group ministries for a long time. What does it take? Anybody that's watching, this is just our story. It's nothing too dynamic, but what's it taking for us as we live into this to be successful with it?
I think to me, it comes down to trust. I think that there are people who've maybe had negative experiences before in small groups, or people who maybe they don't feel ready to share, and that ultimately to build that sense of community, what you're building is that trust. I think a piece of that is the transparency, having it clear, what am I signing up for? If I sign up for this, am I just in this small group forever? Or am I, a sort of feeling of, not being certain what the commitment is or what it will really look like. So I think a piece of that is being super clear and having on-ramps and off-ramps like we've kind of talked about, so that there's a sense of, I want to continue to engage with this, rather than I feel like, it's a little awkward. How would I get out of this if I wanted to? Right. And I think that trust really is both on that side and between members, and as far as in conversations. And really, that's something that doesn't develop overnight. But I think ultimately that's, to me, the key piece that transforms something from a study group to a group where people are really sharing and really living lives together and struggling together.
Yeah, no, that's a good word. And we've made it one thing that I think is important here. We've made it a priority to meet with our small group leaders on a monthly basis, at least maybe 3 to 5 weeks, somewhere in that range, to check in with them, to make sure that they're comfortable with content, any questions. We've been kind of brainstorming some things together, and even as we've rolled out the Free Methodist Way, we've had some deeper discussions about, how to implement that and talk about that. And so it's really important to invest in our small group leaders, and that's a piece that I've been enjoying about this as well. It's created a kind of some good structure for the church as well. So I'm sure you guys will have questions. Thank you, Melanie and Ann, for sharing. And I think for me, just to kind of close this out, I think the thought that came to my mind was, COVID really taught us that we really need to be nimble. We need to be accessible in a variety of ways. We had kind of gotten into the rut. Sunday mornings, all our eggs were in that basket, and we had barely scratched the surface with live streaming. Like, we were recording, but we weren't live streaming. So, it just kind of made us adapt in a variety of ways, and also emphasized, because we couldn't meet in large groups, the importance of small groups. So no matter what comes down the line, we now have a much broader variety of ways to connect with people through services, through live streaming, through small groups, but small groups is really important to us. I personally believe that they are the life source. I think you guys have kind of affirmed that here, the life source of a church community. and I think it's going to be a part of who we are, continue to be a focus for us no matter how we move forward in the future. So if you do have questions, we'll put probably our email address down here at the bottom. Feel free to email or connect with us. I'll be in person for the May 13th session out at Pierce, so you can pull me aside and talk to me there as well. We'd love to just talk and learn from you too. Maybe you're doing some things that we could learn from to even make what we're doing better. So I hope that is true. So may God bless you and keep you and help us all to accomplish His goals and His purposes through our churches. So it's been great to be with you. Thank you, guys.